Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our program tonight. We are back in session. Hello and good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Mom's Night In. I am your host, Sonya Joy Mack, and welcome my other faith-filled moms, our producer, Miss Markeisha Green. Hello. And my co-host for tonight, I missed you last week, I should say, Janice. Welcome back. I'm glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Me. So I know you were at the Phillies game, and I don't even know how they're doing tonight. I think we're at game 7 now.
Game 7 tonight, Tanya. Game 7. So, yes.
I appreciate you being here again tonight. I know this is a big 100%. Night for you. But welcome those that are on.
Said,
please
stop
say hello. Yes. Say hello. Let us know who is joining and where you're from. We're so excited to be here for another Mom's Night In, which is our weekly online program. We have wonderful conversations. And this month, we're continuing with our series with moms who have lost their moms. And this has been just another, I think, powerful series. Each guest, very different in age and situation and things like that. But they have just each in their own way been such a blessing in sharing their story. So I do want to thank each mom that has been there. But we do have our fourth and final guest for this month joining us tonight. And I'm so excited to have Sonya Joy Mack with us. So we're going to bring her out just a minute, but we just want to tell you some good news that we do have coming up next week. We will have a special. We have 5 Tuesdays. So typically when we have 5 Tuesdays, we used to have 5 guests, but we're going to keep having 4 guests and then have a special with special guests, therapists, and I think for next week, it's a therapist, which is a therapist who is a minister and a grief counselor. And then one of our previous Faith-Filled Moms guests from another show who's also lost her mother. She's going to come back and share a little bit of her story with us, Miss Love Jennings-Lynch. So I'm excited to really close the month off. And I pray that this has been helpful and just a period of healing, hopefully, and prayerfully for those that have been experiencing grief, no matter what the relationship is. But I do also, next week, we have another exciting event on Friday, November the 3rd. We, as in Faith-Filled Moms, has been asked to sponsor a local theater production. This show is called Child Support by the Camden Repertory Theater. I did go see it this weekend, and I just raved about it and just talked about different topics. And the director was like, why don't you come back next week and lead a discussion after the show? Of course I will. Of course I will. So it is our Mom's Night Out. So it's Mom's Night In tonight, but Mom's Night Out next Friday at the Camden Repertory Theater. We will put a link in on our page with all the information, ticket purchases, but that's going to be November 3rd at 7 p.m. So specifically calling any single moms who want to join us and really have an interesting conversation about just the support of your co-parent in raising children. And we're just going to have a wonderful faith-filled conversation for that. In raising children, and we're just going to have a wonderful.
That's me. That's me.
Feedback. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye to you then. Markeisha.
Yeah, that's me.
Thank you.
Bye. Listen, I'm on 2 computers. I'm trying to make it work for you.
I hear myself. Okay, take care. So hello to Iris. I know Iris is a guest, a regular guest from North Carolina. So thank you so much for joining. And I see Emily Cannon, who is back, and a future guest next month. She'll be joining us and telling her story for our series next month. So good evening and welcome. And those that are joining, please just jump on, say hello. Let us know who is with us and where you're joining from. So without further ado, I want to bring our guest on. I told her I want to maximize the time that we have because she just, I think, is an amazing individual. And I did not know Sonya before. I think we may have been in a writing group together, but I happened to see her post about her story and her book, and I captured and I wrote her name down. I said, one day I want to have her on the show. And it's been months, I think, since then, but I was so just thankful when I reached out to her. She was like, of course I'll come. And I'm so, so glad she did because, like I said, her story, I cannot wait to get into it. So I'm going to welcome Sonya Joy Mack to our show. Hi, Sonya. How are you?
Hey,
Hi.
fantastic.
Welcome
Hi,
to
ladies.
Faith-Filled Moms. We're so happy to have you with us.
My pleasure for sure.
Wonderful. So before we get started, I'm just going to ask you to take a quick minute just to say hello to our guests. Tell them a little bit about yourself before we get into your story.
You bet. Yeah. So my name is Sonya Mack, and I live in Des Moines, Iowa, with my husband and two girls. They are 10 and 7. Yes, those are my kiddos. You can see Lillian. She's the sassy one there in the center. And Sophia's the little one in the pink dress there. She's she's also, they're both spicy. What am I saying? But people who know me know that they probably get it from me. So I'm not going to lie there. Yeah, I'm a physician assistant by day. I've actually worked in plastic and reconstructive surgery for over 12 years now, which is crazy. We do some really great things in that field. And then I always tell people I'm an entrepreneur, life coach, and author by night and weekend, and whenever else I happen to squeeze some free time in there. So just enjoying, really finding my voice and being able to share these stories with people in the last few years. And that's why I love things like this. I love events where moms, and especially busy moms, working moms, can get together and just share their stories together and learn from each other and pray with each other. And I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, we are honored to have you. And to our audience, Sonya was in surgery today, and I think yesterday too. So I'm so thankful. I know you have very, very long days, but to make time to come and join us, I'm just extremely thankful. So welcome, and we just appreciate you being with us tonight.
Yes,
so we were going to get, thank you. So we're going to get right into Sonya's story. I am going to open us up in prayer, but before I do that, I just want to make sure I do every week, just kind of introduce and just reiterate our mission, why we're even here. And we're here because we're a community of moms, and we provide biblical and emotional support, content, and resources because we want to bring hope, encouragement, inspiration, and information to women facing difficult seasons in life. So you'll notice every month we have a difficult season topic that we talk about. So this month, of course, it's the loss of a mom, but we want to make sure that we're having those conversations, which I always say we don't have in polite conversation. We don't talk about these things typically in polite conversation, but we want to give space and a place to be able to have conversations and be able to have people to, I hopefully have a Me Too moment. I want someone to say Me Too when you're talking to Sonya tonight and to share your story and know that as you've gotten through and what you've used to get through and not even through, but as you're going through your journey of grief, that someone else can hear something that maybe that they can also use and it would be helpful to them. So that's our mission. We're thankful to God that every week we're able to just walk this mission out. And we're thankful what he's doing in this program. So without further ado, let's go ahead and pray and get right into Sonya's story. Dear Heavenly Father and God, we thank you again for allowing us to meet another Tuesday night. Lord, we thank you for this ministry that you have just given us the honor and the privilege and the responsibility to uphold, Lord. So we just pray again that we honor you tonight with this conversation. Lord, we thank you for Sonya. We thank you for her story. And we just pray that you would just be with her tonight, Lord, be with me and Janice and just our full team. We just pray special blessing, even for those that may be watching, God, those that are struggling with grief and needing comfort and needing healing, God. We just pray that you know what they need, that you would provide and speak to their hearts tonight and just say a word to them that they would feel a little bit better and just a little bit more healed than they were at the start of this show, God. And we just pray that you would be with all of our technology, that everything would work like it should, and this broadcast would not be interrupted in any way, shape, or form. And we just give you the glory tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so as usual with all of our guests, Sonya's story will be published tomorrow on faithfulmoms.org. So as I say every week, if you have not already, please be sure to sign up. Your email will be in your inbox with her blog first thing in the morning when you log into your email. So you do not want to miss hers or really any other story. So the best way to make sure you're capturing and hearing each person's story the next day is to sign up for our mailing list, and you'll get that information. And then you'll also get information about future guests. Every week you'll get the notice for future guests that we have and future topics that we'll have on our show. And if you haven't already, please share this with someone. If you know someone, send them the link, text them, invite them to join us. Anyone that's dealing with grief of any kind, just please invite them to join us. And I know that they'll hear something tonight that will be just beneficial and a blessing to them. So Sonya, I want to talk about your mother, starting off with really just introducing her to our viewers. And I felt a great way to do that. You talked in your blog a very sweet story about a deluxe dream Barbie dollhouse, which I think almost all of us in whatever shape or form, we've seen those Barbie dollhouses that we wanted. So share a little bit about that story, but really more so what that meant in terms of your relationship with your mom, not only as a child, but even as an adult as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think, especially now with the Barbie movie coming out, right, or having come out, I think everybody can relate to that. So I grew up in a, I would say lower middle class family. So, we had enough, but that was about it. We had just enough. And so, every time I lived in a small town in Iowa, and my mom and I, so my brother and sister are 7 and 9 years older than me. And so my mom and I, we were like, my brother joked, 2 peas in a God pod. Like we were best friends. So we would often be found out at Kmart, the like only big store in our town. And I particularly remember this one day, when this huge display of the Barbie dream house was out. And I remember it because, I was looking at all these wonderful little pieces. But then all of a sudden, and I was known not to stray far from my mom. Like I was always grabbing her little pinky. She just was just the light of my life, even from a young age. And I remember turning around in the store, and I don't know what had happened, but all of a sudden I didn't see her. And it's that instant, if you've been a mom who's lost your child or a child who's lost your mom in a store like that, that just draining sensation. It's like your whole body, everything comes out of you. And I just remember searching the store, and I'm this little girl, probably 5 years old. Just luckily I lived in a small town, so it was pretty safe back then. But I just remember searching the store, asking everyone if they saw the redhead with the blue and white shirt. Have you seen the redhead with the blue and white shirt? And finally, bless her heart, some sweet lady walked me up to the front, and they asked me my name, and they paged my mom overhead. And I just remember seeing my mom when she saw me, and she just picked me up and just grabbed me, and that like I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, just that love that she wrapped around. And that was my mom. My mom radiated love and joy to people. Sure, she had a sassy side, just like most of us do. I mean, we're moms, right? Like, I think it was my 10-year-old once that said, "Mom, you have scary eyes." And I'm like, well, if you wouldn't do that, my scary eyes wouldn't come out.
But scary eyes are good. They're good.
Yeah, right.
They're
I mean,
useful
you gotta
tools.
use. I'm like, and my husband agreed with her. She's like, yeah, she does have scary eyes sometimes. But I just remember that so much because that was the story of my mom and I. And my friends all just loved her so much because she was always just so jovial and outgoing, and she just loved people. She would. I remember to this day knowing, it was kind of always disjointed in my head because I knew we didn't have a lot, but she would get like envelopes for like the American Cancer Association or whatnot. And she'd be writing checks to them. And I'd be thinking in my young mind, why is she giving them money? We don't have a lot, but I get it now. I mean, even then it was just so important for her. She was such a giver and just a lover. And, one of the things I tell most is one of my favorite things to do, even when I was way too old to do it, was like to crawl up on her lap in like the recliner chair that we would have. And I would just like snuggle into her because she was not like really overweight, but also not like maybe a little fluffy is probably a good way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just like snuggle into her. And even when I was like a teenager and like an adult, I remember that. And so it was just such a beautiful, this is what I love. I love talking about my mom. I could talk about her all day, but yeah. So those are the things I remember, the most about her, and just that when people talk about her, those are the things that they would tell you.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get into her diagnosis. I have a friend who has ALS as well. And I didn't know what it was. She called me out of the blue, and I actually wrote a story and guidepost about our relationship. But I've seen what it's done to her. She's still with us, and she actually watches the show every now and then, and she talks with her eyes on the computer. But I know when I saw your story, I was like, wow, I know. And even one of your pictures of your mom reminded me of her. It's almost like they had the same gown on that my friend would wear. But I want to talk to you about when you received your mother's diagnosis. Did you know what it was? What were those initial thoughts and emotions that went through your head when you talked about what that meant for your future, the future for your mom?
Yeah. So my mom, because she was so funny and always kind of said, I always often call her naive to the world. So she would say like things sometimes that I'd be like, are you playing with me, or do you really not know the answer here? She called me one time. So I was to kind of put the time frame in, I was in PA school at the time. And she had already been kind of going through like she had some issues. And what she had called me about once was, she felt like one leg was shorter than the other one. And so I started this path with her. We went to multiple doctors down here in Des Moines, and they kept kind of giving her this diagnosis, which, being in PA school, you know enough, but you don't know enough. And I remember being like, no, that's not the right answer. That's not the right answer. And so I would just keep going. And eventually we ended up at Mayo Clinic, and she had 2 full days of testing. And it was actually happened to just be my mom and I at the time, because my dad had to work. And so, being the single income family that we were, he had to go to work a lot. And so I had taken my mom up there, and he always said, you're going to understand what they say more than I am anyway, just with the medical background a little bit. But I remember when they told me that it was ALS, it was like, how on a radio when you're listening and all of a sudden there's static and you're like waiting, and then it like cuts in and out, and then it was like they said ALS, and then I don't remember what he said, and then it was like 3 to 5 years life expectancy, static, losing all your muscle control, static. Like this is what I remember hearing about. And in my mind, I'm like, ALS, I know I should know more about this. Like, gosh, Sonya, you're in PA school. Like, haven't we learned about this? And then, it kind of clicked in as he was telling me. Then I remembered, of course, just what comes along with the diagnosis. And it is, there's no way to spin ALS. It is pretty tragic. There's not really any great treatments. There's not really any great cures. There's no cure, of course. They've come a long way since the Ice Bucket Challenge, which has done a lot of research for ALS. But I just remember, how my mom and I would do this is we would drive up to Mayo for her appointment, and then we would meet in Clear Lake, Iowa, which is halfway between where I lived and she lived, and so it's a meeting point. So I really remember holding it together, and we were pretty quiet on the way even to Clear Lake, because she, of course, was trying to process what was going on and knew that I didn't know all the answers. And then as soon as I got in my car, I just remember calling my best friend and being and just losing it, right? And like, I can't. How am I supposed to live for the rest of my life without my mom? Like, my mom is my person. I at the time I wasn't married yet. I didn't have any kids. I'm like, she can't miss out on all these things. We haven't done all the traveling stuff we're supposed to be. So it was a very surreal moment, and just continued to be that way, because you just never know. If you know anything about ALS, you don't, they say 3 to 5 years, but it could be 6 months, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. a lot of it depends on whether or not a person chooses to go on a ventilator or not. And the progression is just different for everybody. So, but I think a lot of people can relate to just when you hear the news of a diagnosis for the first time, whether it's you or someone you love so deeply, that there's just that, it's like you almost lose the ability to think. You hear the first things and then it's like static.
Your mind just
goes blank. Yeah.
Wow. Now, Sonya, you were pretty relatively young, right, as this is happening, as your mom is transitioning through her journey with ALS. So obviously, during those moments, thoughts have to start going through your mind, as in, like, what is my life going to look like with mom not here? Kind of how did you handle that moment where you're watching your mom navigate ALS, and then you're really processing your future, what life's going to look like? Kind of how did you navigate that space?
Yeah. So, it was difficult. I guess the one thing that somewhat helped is I was still in PA school at the time, so I was very busy at the same time. And God bless my dad. He just took such good care of her. In the beginning, she could still get around pretty well, and so even though we were down in Des Moines, she could still kind of drive down here a little bit, and she could still talk fairly well. But I do just remember kind of working through that with God a little bit as all of that came about. And it again, it's such a surreal thing to deal with. I remember in the beginning just being so scared, right? I mean, I think everybody can relate to being scared when you're faced with that. And there were just so many changes happening. And change is hard, and sickness is scary even for someone like me. And I think it was especially hard for me because I was in this medical field, right? And by then I kind of graduated from PA school, and so I was supposed to know all the things. All the questions would come to me, and I didn't always have the answers. And you kind of almost go down this rabbit hole of research and Googling everything, right? And I was forced to kind of think ahead because you're right. I was, at the time of her diagnosis, I was probably about 24.
Wow.
And, I was engaged to be married, but not married at the time. So, I mean, here we were kind of living this semi-normal life early in the beginning. She was helping plan my wedding because I was in PA school. I got married during PA school. So her and my now husband were helping plan my wedding. And we go to the wedding. She's able to walk, pretty well at that time, still get around, and you kind of get this semblance that things are normal. And then as the disease progressed, it becomes more and more real. And I've often asked myself, because, some people lose their parents or their loved ones very suddenly. And there is something about a traumatic grief like that that's very hard.
Yeah.
But I've had people ask me a lot, well, what is it like, knowing, like, you knew for years that your mom was going to pass.
And it's almost anticipating that day and dread.
Anticipatory grief is what they call it. Yeah. And anticipatory grief is very difficult because, again, like, you still have her, but she's not the same. Like, her spirit's the same.
Yeah.
But her body is not, and that's the one thing about ALS is their mind doesn't change. It's not like dementia. They're completely the same up here. But lucky for me, I mean, my mom struggled, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, her faith actually got stronger during this illness than before. And we would have, so I'm Catholic, and my mom was not before her diagnosis, but decided that she wanted to become after her diagnosis, which was really cool. And, but we had people bringing communion out to our house. And so many of these people would tell us, like, I learned more about faith from your mom in a hospital bed than I've learned years, and even though her writing was kind of failing, she would write things about, I'm scared, but Jesus, I still have faith in you. And I wonder what it's going to be like to dance with you again. And so that song, I Can Only Imagine, by Mercy Me, I can only imagine when I'm up there. That song got us through a lot. Just imagining. We would talk about that when she would get kind of scared. What's heaven going to look like, Mom? What's heaven going to feel like? What's it going to be like when Jesus welcomes you? What does all that? So I think, especially in a role of anticipatory grief, trying to bring in as much of the good as you can, because it can be so difficult sometimes.
The weighing, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And you, in the blog, you do refer to yourself as being like a motherless mom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you kind of like elaborate more on what it's like being a motherless mom, and then also how that impacted your relationship with God after your mom passed away? Because we know through our series and moms we've talked to, that's been a real big turning point for them, especially initially, right? Like when they looked to God, they kind of had a moment where they were like, look, God, I'm not really sure what's happening here. So can you kind of dive into how your relationship with God changed, and explain more about what motherless mom means to you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I remember when, I had always looked so my sister, because she was so much older than I was, actually when my first niece was born, I was only 10. So I had seen how amazing of a grandma my mom was, right? And so I was always, before her diagnosis especially, I was so looking forward to when she would be a grandma to my children, because I just could imagine how much fun they would have with her, and how good she was with her grandkids. And here I was, ideally my husband and I, when we first get married, we have plans for when you're going to have kids, right? And we're going to have 3 kids, and we're going to do that. Yeah, that all changes, right?
Yep, exactly.
So we had originally said 5 years after we get married, we'll have kids. Well, that was kind of in the height of when my mom was sick, and, towards the end, especially. And obviously we just felt like that was not a good time to have a child. And so, we knew that we were going to wait until after everything, until after she had passed, to be honest. And because we also knew that because of the type of person she was, it was already hard enough for her to leave us, her family, her core family, that to add a grandchild onto that would just make things even harder. So, here I was, age of my first child was born at 31, and she was born blue with the cord around her neck and had to go to the NICU because she had an infection. And then, you go forward, and she had terrible colic. I don't know if anyone has had a colicky baby, but my Lord, it's amazing I had a second one. But, here I was, a mom for the first time. And in general, who do you want to call if you have a good relationship with your mom? You want to call your mom, because I don't care how old you are. If you have a good relationship with your mom, you want to talk to your mom. When you're sick, you want to talk to your mom. When your kids are sick, you want to talk to your mom. When you're having trouble with anything, you want to talk to your mom. So here I was, a new mom with, a baby that was just so colicky, and all I wanted to do was talk to my mom. And that was when I realized, what does a motherless mom do? So here I was, a mom without a mom. And that's when that statement really kind of hit me, is the motherless mom part. And, fast forward 3 more years, my second child would be born, and she would have, she actually, this is a whole nother story for a whole nother day, but, she would have, a whole nother series. But she was born with a lung condition we didn't know about until she was born. Although I had God put it on my heart, she was going to have something. There was going to be something when she was born, but she had to have a surgery to remove part of her lung when she was 4 days old. And, you're in this heartbreaking situation, and you just want your mom. And again, I'm like, what do I, so luckily, by the grace of God, I did have some great friends, and even a friend that was my mom's age, who was very loving and wonderful to me. But I will tell you that my relationship with God during those times really shifted in a lot of ways, which I think is normal. And I don't want to say that he expects that, because everybody reacts to grief and trauma differently. Some of us instantaneously just grab on and hold on to God. And I would like to say that that's where I've become. That's like where I'm getting to. But in the beginning, after all of this, and especially, you know, I'm like, okay, Lord, isn't it enough? Like, I've already lost my mom. Now you have to give me this baby that has colic, and you have to give me this baby that almost died. Like at the moment, in the time, we didn't know if she was going to live or die. And I just remember, so I'm a writer. So I just remember journaling over and over and over again. Where's my joy? My mom named me Sonya Joy Mack because I was meant to spread joy to the world. Well, Sonya Joy Lameth is my maiden name, but Sonya Joy. And I used to hate my middle name, like, because my brother and sister would just pick on me. You know, they would sit on me and sing, I got a joy, 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 joy down in my heart, you know, just like older brothers and sisters do. But here I was thinking to myself, Lord, how am I supposed to spread joy to the world when I can't even find it myself? How am I supposed to do that? And he and I, we would have a few conversations. We would have some words, right? How many of you have had words with God before, right?
And in fact, to be comfortable enough to have that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what's important. So many of us maybe were like not taught to allow yourself to get that real and that intimate with God.
He wants
you know?
that from us. He absolutely wants to know how we feel, and he wants us to bring that to him.
Right. I mean, and I think that, I got Holy Spirit goosebumps on that. That was a word for somebody. Somebody needed to hear that one. But that's exactly what God, he wants to hear our hurts. That's why he says, you know, take my yoke upon you, you know, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. He literally wants us to give him the heavy so that he can carry it for us. Or like that famous poem, Footprints in the Sand, he wants to carry us, right? That's just, but, and so here I was year after year after year, just filling notebooks and journals of why, asked why a lot. And I got really angry with him a lot. And I even turned away from him for a while. And I even thought he didn't exist for a while. But none of that made sense, right? As the more I would turn away, the more it's almost like I would turn away, but then when I stepped back towards him, I was closer than I was before.
You were before.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy how that works?
He's so gracious like that, though. Like, he I think he desires that. And even when we're struggling with how we're feeling or what we're thinking, it's like he's there. He's close by and just waiting to reveal himself and to show himself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's something I didn't understand for a really long time. But through these, you know, through everything that I would write, he would remind me of all of these like biblical and spiritual principles, things like faith, hope, love. But it was just, we were building a relationship, God and I were, through my own grief. And there was a line that I read in a book once. It was just like a book my church gave out during Advent, I believe. Yes, it was Advent. And there was a line in there that said, the struggle is intentional. And it was like, but it made so much more sense, right? I was like, it just made so much more sense. Like, oh, okay. Like, you didn't do this just to hurt me, right? You did this so that I could learn something.
There's a purpose somewhere.
There's a purpose somewhere. And, you know, I've continued, that is a message that I have continued to not only learn from, but teach for years now, is that the struggle is intentional. We don't always know it at first. We definitely don't always know it at first. In fact, most of the time we don't get it until
we're through it, right? Until we're almost on the side of it.
Yep. But then the graciousness. Yes. See, I get it. Yep. Sorry. I'm like, yeah, see, there's a word. These are words for people. These are not my words, people. These are the Holy Spirit. This is how it works. This is why I love this stuff so much. But it was during that time that I really started to ask in my journals, you can see it shifting from, instead of asking why, I started to ask what. What do you want me to do with this, Lord? Not why is this happening, but what do you want me to do?
Because that's an acceptance. You're showing I've accepted it now. So now what? And that's definitely a transformation in that journey.
Yeah. And that's the power of, 2 verses got me through so much. One is, just be still and know that I'm God. And that came from my dear friend that she's in her 70s. She's like my parents' age. I met her when I was in 4th grade. She has that plastered all over her wall. And, I'll be the first to admit to you that, we kind of went to church when I was younger, but really my faith was like something I kind of built on my own, just because of who I was around. So that be still and know verse from Psalms is like the first one that just kept coming back to me, coming back to me. But then, the Romans 8:28, all things work together. And I'm like, in the beginning, you're like, how can this be good? How can all things, he doesn't say, but then you have to remember, he doesn't say that all things are good. Yeah. He says all things will work together for good.
Working together for our good.
Yeah. And so now whenever something happens that's just so difficult, the first question I ask is, okay, God, what do you want me to do with this? You said the struggle is intentional, so I need to learn something. And then it's going to help in some way. It's going to help me praise, reverence, and serve you. So what is it you want me to learn?
Yeah, that's amazing, that viewpoint. And I think that's really in part of what this show is about. Every guest that we have on has gone through something so difficult, but it's like we get the opportunity now to say, where was God in it? What did you learn from it? And what can you share with someone else to help them now on their journey? So like there is purpose. What are we doing with what God allowed to happen to us? So
yeah, absolutely. That's why this show is so beautiful. You guys are doing that. This is the work of God right here. This is good stuff.
Thank you. And I wanted to take a step back. You mentioned, I just thought of it when you were saying you had your oldest daughter, and I can remember my mom, coming to our house and we were clueless that first night we came home from the hospital, and the way that she just kind of stepped in and took our daughter. And my daughters are 3 years apart, just like yours. And so, but she came and stepped in and we were just clueless. And I have a cousin who just had a baby and his mother passed away some time ago. And I remember he texted me, he's like, just pray, she won't go to sleep. And I'm like, oh, his mom's not there. Cause that was my first thing. Like, well, what is, both spouses didn't have a mom. And it's just, I just thought of that. That was the one thing, that first night home, like who else would know what to do, but my mom, So it's interesting to see a situation where that's a gift that everyone doesn't really have the pleasure of even having that support with that. So mom, if you're watching, I hope you are. She never comments, but if you're watching, I want to say hello and always say thank you. It's interesting. My second child, I think I sent her home after 2 days. I was like, I don't need you anymore. You did a good job the first time. I'm good. I'm good now.
Yeah, I know. There's something about the second one that you're just like, I remember like, after we realized she was going to survive and, we were back home and she would kind of cry a little and I would look at her and be like, really? Is that all you got? I could do this. This is nothing compared to the first one.
We were good.
But the funny thing is I've told, well, obviously, not to jump ahead, but my oldest kid especially has read parts of my book and she's in it. And so she'll ask me all these questions now, like, Mom, did I really cry that much? I'm like, yeah, you really cried that much. Yep, you sure did.
We had a niece our niece, my sister Tina, who was another guest on the show, but her daughter had colic as well. We'd be around my mom's house and like, would someone please, we just could not get her to stop crying. So I can't say I know firsthand, but kind of secondhand from that experience with her.
Yeah.
So I want to transition to my next question for you, but I want to just share. I know we're talking about your mom's diagnosis with ALS, and for those that may not know, it is it's also called Lou Gehrig's disease, and it's muscle degenerativization, and so like your muscles basically cease to work, where you stop walking and talking and eventually stop breathing. And that's what you mentioned, being on the ventilator because you can no longer breathe for yourself and the ventilator has to breathe for you. So just to see your loved one go through that process of slowly losing all of those that muscle function, that's literally was your experience. So I wanted to talk to you about, even with that as part of your journey, you just mentioned your book, This Changes Everything, When Death No Longer Has the Final Say. But I want you to talk about some of the revelations that you received that led you to write this book, but especially in terms of what memories mean and the role that memories the role that memories play in a grief journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I often liken ALS to a candle burning down. Like the person's flame is still there, their heart, their soul is still there, which, I can only imagine what having a parent or family member with Alzheimer's is, where their body is still there for the most part, but their mind is not. Almost the total opposite with ALS. Their body just fails over time. I mean, by the time my mom passed, she had a feeding tube and a ventilator, and she was on a morphine drip in the hospital bed and required 24-hour care. So I mean, it was a lot. But yeah, so it was, again, I mentioned that I'm a writer, and I'm meaning that like I write that's my preferred form of prayer, actually, is to write. So I write all the time, and there was a point where I was talking to my brother. This was a Christmas, probably 3 years after my youngest was born. So, or actually she was a baby. It was like right after, excuse me, my oldest was about 3. So my baby was a baby. But I was talking to him, and because my brother and I are actually pretty close too. My sister and brother and I are pretty close now, but I remember talking to him at one point and just being like, I don't know how to live without her. Like, I just don't. I was trying so hard, and both at this point, Sophia, my youngest, because of what she was born with, she just had so many doctor's appointments, and my oldest had ADHD. We knew she had ADHD. They were all a lot, and I was just all these things, and I just remember talking to him one day and being like, I don't know. I don't know what to do without her. And he said, when he's sad, he's a psychologist, so he always has really good things to say. He said when he's sad, instead of focusing on what he's sad about, he tries to focus on what he can be grateful for. So in that moment, when he starts to miss mom, he focuses on the fact that she lived long enough that some of us have memories that we can share with other people, being like our children, because my mom passed when his only daughter she was only a few years old, so she never really got to meet her either. And I remember it was just like lightning struck. I was like, that's it, Shane. Like, don't you get it? Like, this changes everything. The memories. Like, I know everything about my mom. We were so close. I knew what she would say in like every situation, and any trip we would go on as if like my husband and I are a family. I knew, like, I'd be like, oh my gosh, my mom would love that. Oh my gosh, that would make her laugh. She was so known. She was just so goofy. How a lot of like clothing stores will play music. She would like dance in the store all the time. So embarrassing as a high school kid. But, I'd be like, oh my gosh, she would be dancing to this. And the other really beautiful thing is, because I was a writer, sometimes I would just sit down and I would be like, okay, Mom, what should I do? And I'd write it out. And then I would write a letter back to myself as if my mom were writing to me. Wow. And I was like, Shane, don't you get this? Like, my memories are so powerful. She's gone, but she's never really gone. I can take her with me everywhere. Like, death doesn't get to win anymore. I remember everything about her. And so I remember talking to my aunt not long after that and going, I'm going to rewrite my story. I'm going to rewrite how things would have been different if my mom were still around. Like, how would the birth of my children have looked? And how would, we would have gone on all these different trips. Where would we have gone, and what would we have done, and how crazy would she have been? And the most beautiful thing that I remember after I decided to write, the book, and I was talking to my girls. So before my mom passed, these 3 very beautiful women came out, and they would come out every week when my mom was in a hospital bed, and they would bring all these sewing things out, and they would sew with her. She couldn't sew, but she would be in the room and they would sew, and they would talk and laugh. And so they sewed these pillows for all the grandkids. But of course, they didn't know how many kids I would have.
Mm-hmm.
And so they just made 2 pillows. And one of the pillows was very obviously girly, and the other one was like a Noah's Ark pillow. And they each had like a thumbprint on them from my mom.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. So I hope I don't have more than 2 kids, or I hope, what am I going to do with these if I don't have them? But my first child was a girl, and I gave Lillian, I gave the pillow, and then the second one, Sophia, I could have swore before I knew what she was going to be, that she was going to be a boy, because this Noah's Ark pillow looked a little bit more boyish. It was blue, but after she was born, I was like, oh my gosh, Noah's Ark is the story of God's promises to us when we think that there's nothing else. Like, right, everything around us is water. We can't even see land. And it's God's promise to us.
Yeah.
It made total sense in hindsight. But one night, my oldest she was about 5, probably 5. And she was holding that pillow, and she was looking for the little thumbprint from my mom. And she said, Mom, I miss Grandma Vicky. And I was like, I did it. Meaning, my daughter has never met my mom. Never met my mom. Although, you've heard stories about how like souls from heaven can sometimes talk with children. I don't know any of it. I don't claim to know that. But here I had shared enough about my mom, my memories of my mom, and I had shared enough about that with my children that they missed her.
That they missed. They felt like they knew her. Yeah.
They felt like they knew her enough to miss her. And that to me was like equal parts, like, I'm like, oh my God, so like, it was just so overwhelming, but it was so joyful because I was like, I'm doing it. I'm sharing the memories of this person who meant so much to me with all these people. And so what I share a lot about with people who have lost someone they love is I really feel like the enemy wants us to focus on the hard stuff, what they looked like before they passed, like how sick they were.
Distractions, right? Those are all
distractions.
Wow.
Yes. And that might be something that we have to work through with, a therapist or a pastor. But God wants us to remember the good stuff. Like He wants us to have those memories, and so that's the beautiful part, and that's what I ended up writing a book about.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so in your blog, you have an excerpt. When I read it, I was like, she has to read this on the show. And I'm looking at the time, so we're running a little late, but I'm going to ask you to combine reading the excerpt. And if you could, at the end of the excerpt, just give, I'd say, parting words in terms of just a message that you want to leave with our viewers tonight, if you would.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for letting me share.
And let me ask you, so Markeisha, if you don't mind putting the picture of the book up and the website as she's talking, so that way everyone can know how to connect with Sonya and purchase her book, and they'll have all her information as well.
Awesome. Thank you. But your death, in stark contrast, created a vast wound that irrevocably changed the landscape of my soul. Over time, the wound has begun to heal. In its place, a scar I wear as a badge of honor in remembrance. My precious memories of you live in me, so deeply etched even the winds and sands of time could never erode them. Well-meaning people, therapists, and friends have told me that grief is a process I must go through, and I agree. Your death is something I'm still processing. Grief hurts, to the marrow, filtering through the bones kind of pain. It weaved its way into my being, taking up residency. They say grief comes in stages. I've seen them all. The denial was powerful and even surprising, given your death was prolonged by your disease. Years later, I'm still struck by the pang of truth you're no longer here. Anger came quickly, expected given how tightly you were woven into the fabric of my life. I still feel the flames of anger linger in my heart, But my anger comforted me in your absence. It shielded me from the attempts of others to console me. It was my barrier to the rest of the world. I isolated myself from everyone and any unnecessary activity, blocking all emotion for fear of losing any remaining strength I had. I forced myself into autopilot. Each day was a haze of necessary obligations, nestled between the safety of seclusion. Without you, life seemed devoid of the joy and love you radiated. When my anger grew especially strong, I could hear your gentle voice reminding me, let go, sunshine. Don't be angry too long. God didn't take me to hurt you, but to save me. Wrap yourself in his love because my love is there too. Yeah, and so this little excerpt here from my book was just a very real realization that I had to come to, because it is, in the medical field, we talk about, the marrow being the very center of the bones. Yes. And, some people, when it's really cold outside, they'll be like, I'm chilled to the bone. And I just remember feeling that grief in the beginning was just something that settled into my bones. And it took me a long time to really figure out again, and a lot of working with God and praying through it. But he really came to show me, and I've mentioned this before, but the most important things, number one, the struggle was intentional. Mm-hmm. Number two, he really does work all things together for good. We don't always know them in the beginning, but he certainly does. Number three, he didn't take her to hurt me. He took her to save her, and he had another plan for her. And ultimately, he had a plan. He knew more than I did that I wasn't going to just let her go. I wasn't just going to let her death be the end. I was going to use it to share a message. And that's something that's super powerful. And I just think that it's just such a wonderful, it's just such a blessing for me, actually, to be able to use some of the hardest parts of my life to be able to share with other people. And so I really hope those words have helped someone tonight. Yeah, I'm so grateful to be able to share here. Thank you.
That was beautiful. I think your words brought Journey onto the screen.
Hi.
You might have been so moved by the word.
What a joy.
There we go. That's okay. Girl, I've got kids. Like I said, the only reason they're not in front of me right now is because my husband has them somewhere else. So
I was saying you must have brought her to the screen, but I love that. And it's reminding me of one of our guests, Jesse, who was on this month as well. Kind of that same theme that a lot of times we internalize the hurt and the loss that we felt, but God didn't take her to hurt, our loved ones to hurt us, but to save them. And when we think about the transformation that has taken place and we picture them in heaven in his presence, it's like we miss them physically, but how could we ever be sad about the experience that they're having in his presence? For me, especially in processing the grief in the losses that I've had, that's where I feel what I feel and I process it, but I have to always turn it around. But where are they now? But what are they experiencing? They are in the utopian, presence of God, that there's nothing that could ever go wrong. No negative emotions ever. So I love that. And one of the things that I'm taking with me from what you shared in terms of the memories, and it just came to mind, I think about it in terms, a lot of times with trauma, people talk about triggers, right? When they're triggered, certain triggers make them feel a certain way, but it's almost like the memory is the opposite effect. It's a positive trigger where that memory is something that creates the opposite effect that a trigger would have, that it gives you that joy, it brings you into that spot, into that place of maybe joy or peace or you smile on your face. So I feel like those memories are those positive triggers that really do bring a smile to your face and really can bring joy back into your life when you think about those memories.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I think, and I would just, anybody who has lost someone they love, I would just remind them, we had talked, I think you mentioned something, I can't remember if it was before the show or during, but, we talked about, you mentioned things that sometimes allowing people to talk about things that we don't necessarily talk about in normal conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like the stigma that I'm trying to break with this, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to say I don't care, but I kind of don't care if people are tired of hearing about my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? Like I loved her, and I'm going to tell you about her, and I'm going to tell you about all the cool things she did, and I'm going to tell you about what I learned about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a stigma that I feel like I really, that needs to change, right? I don't think your parent or loved one or grandma or grandpa, daughter, anybody can be gone for years, and I think it's still okay to talk about
Yeah.
them, and it's still okay to miss them.
Yeah.
And that's another kind of stigma that I'm looking to change.
Yeah. When people say get over it, or a certain time for grieving or whatever, like, no, your journey is your journey, and never allow anyone to say what your process should look like, or if you should stop talking or move on, whatever that even means. Yeah, that's you hold on to and process it whatever way that you need to process it, however you need to work through that. Sonya, thank you. Thank you so
You are welcome.
much. I always call it divine, but I know our paths crossed for this reason. So I am appreciative of you, and I will have you back, because we have done a congenital conditions topic before.
There you go.
One of the things we're going to do is bring back additional guests on those same topics. So I'll be sure to have you back on our show when we get to that point. But I want to say again, thank you. Sonya's full story, I know we talked about it a bit tonight, but her full story will be on faithfulmoms.org tomorrow. So please, if you have not signed up, go to that website tonight. Give us your email address, and we'll make sure we get her blog to you as well. But I do want to, Markeisha, if you could put up her website again, SonyaJoyMack.com. Her book is This Changes Everything: When Death No Longer Has the Final Say. It's available pretty much all the book retail stores, right? I think I saw that almost anywhere you can purchase her book. So I do believe it'll be a blessing, and I am waiting on my copy as well. So I am.
Yes. I know. Gosh,
what a blessing.
So the only reason you don't have it yet is because my office is in boxes, and I can't find my little mailing envelopes. I'm like, oh my gosh,
you have me going out to the mailbox every day, like, where is it here?
I know. I'm sorry. Yes, that is on my list. I need to find those. I need to just go buy new envelopes. I don't know why I'm trying to find them right now. I just need to go buy new envelopes. But yes, yours is coming.
Thank you. And we'll have it listed on our website, on our resource page as well, to make sure that it's definitely a resource for people to use. So again, thank you for joining us. Thank you all who have watched us, whether you're live or watching the recording. And again, we're inviting you back next week as we close out this series. We will have, again, one of our previous Faithful Moms guests, Loves Jennings Lynch, will be joining us and sharing her story. She lost her mom, I think, at 19. She was very young. So she's going to come back and share her story. And then we also have Dr. Nicole Johnson, who is a faith-based counselor and an ordained minister. And then Paula Hollis, who's also a certified grief coach and has also lost her mother and her spouse and her siblings. She will be coming and just sharing her story, and even sharing some of the grief coaching, just wisdom that she has gained from her experiences as well. So again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you, Sonya, again, for being our wonderful guest. And we will see everyone next week. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.